What's up, Buff Nation? Hopefully you guys are having a good week. Your week is off to a good start. This is a couple of days late, but it is the prime time for college football, and we are finally here to talk about Coach Prime's offense, the offense of the Buffs this year. Now, Coach Prime is on record talking about how excited he is for this offense. He doesn't try to overhype too much. He does a good job of being measured and not trying to give too many people too many things they can have receipts on him for. But you can tell by looking at his face, looking at his smile, his $1 million smile, when he talks about this offense, how truly excited he is. We've talked about this offense. We've talked about the weapons, and we've talked about the offensive line upgrades. We've talked about what we expect out of Deion Sanders. Today, we're actually going to look at what that offense may look like for this 2024 season, this inaugural season in the Big 12. It's going to be a big year for a lot of reasons. It's going to be a big year to determine where Shedeur and others are drafted. It's going to be a big year to kind of learn where does Colorado fit in the Big 12, and it's going to be a big year to silence all of the doubters who said all the things that they had to say about Colorado's 4-8 season last year. They're moving to the Big 12. The Big 12 typically thought of as having high-powered, explosive offenses. Obviously, Oklahoma was a huge part of that. Oklahoma was a big reason that the Big 12 had to adapt. They were the cream of the crop in the Big 12 for much of the last couple of decades. And because of their high-powered and high-flying offenses, the rest of the league had to try to catch up, and also has a high-flying offense mentality in the league. Now, even with Texas and Oklahoma gone to the SEC, it is still a league that you would expect will score a lot of points. Oklahoma State has always scored a lot. Baylor has always been a high-scoring team. Texas Tech is a very high-scoring team. UCF, a new addition as of last year, is a team that seems like they are going to add a lot of offensive firepower. Cincinnati and others, there are a lot that you can look at that bring a lot of offense. And so Colorado's offense will need to be dynamic. It will need to be very good, and we believe that it very much will be. Let's look at what the offense can look like. Let's start with the quarterback position, where we have Deion Sanders as the starter. I'm not breaking any news here. I'm not saying anything that's going to shock you by telling you that I expect Deion Sanders to be the starter. I think that's the one position you can be the most confident in on this team. Ryan Staub likely backing him up, Wade and Taylor behind him. Staub with some good experience who can step in. He certainly, you hope you don't see him a ton, but if Sanders was to get banged up a little bit like he did last year, you've got some pretty decent quality depth behind him. Now, I don't think anybody behind Shedeur is going to be a game changer. I don't think anybody's going to be a breakout where they all of a sudden just take the job away from Shedeur. But I do think you've got some good quality depth behind him. You've got to have somebody who is somewhat capable behind Shedeur just in case the absolute worst happens. That's probably the least dramatic slide that we'll have, maybe until we get to our very last one. But let's look at the next position up. The next position up is the one we'll look at is running backs. And I've got kind of a cheat here on the first one. I think Alton McCaskill and Dylan, I think Edwards as well, I think they're going to be very similar in the number of touches and carries they get. I think there could be games where Alton gets a ton of carries. I think there could be games where Edwards gets the bulk of the carries. And I think that will really come down to who is hot at that time. Who is the one that is running a little bit better? How do the matchups look? Are we looking for a little bit more speed? Are we looking for somebody who can get in there and mix it up with a little bit more force? That will be big to me when we get into the season. But at the end of the day, I think these two clearly get the load of carries, the 1 and the 2 there as kind of a two-headed monster there in the backfield. You've got some backups. You've got Wilkerson, Welch. You got Charlie down there as well. You've got a few guys that you can lean on if needed, but I do believe that McCaskill and Edwards are going to get the bulk of the carries. Again, I'm not breaking any news there. That's certainly what the expectation is. I do like Wilkerson and his speed kind of backing them up. I think he'll get the third most carries. I don't expect other guys to mix it up as much. I think this will be a pretty pass-heavy offense this year again, but I do think that when we run in the running game, I think you'll see Alton and Edwards getting the bulk of those carries. Wide receiver is an interesting one, too. I kind of gave you my top line, and we'll see how all this shakes out. It's hard to really do a wide receiver depth chart because, man, they're going to look at guys for matchups. They're going to look at, man, what do we need out of this certain type of play call? So if they need somebody who's a more precise route runner, or they need somebody who's just an absolute speedster burner, or they need somebody with really sure hands to go out there and pick up a 3rd and 7, or they need a bigger guy who can go out there and win a jump ball, that is probably what determines wide receiver 1, 2, 3, 4 more than anything else. It's more about matchups at that wide receiver position, but you don't start any conversation without having Travis Hunter at the very top of it. Now, I believe that this year you'll see Hunter more on defense and less on offense than you saw last year. That said, Hunter is an absolute game changer who, when you absolutely need a big play, or it's late in the game, or it's a critical situation, I think those this year. I think those are the guys at the top of your depth chart. I don't necessarily have them in any order there. I just kind of, as the guys came to my mind, that's how we put them in. But I think those are the guys who are typically going to be on the field more often than not. I think Draylon Miller will get in and be able to mix it up some. I really like that kid. We talked about him a ton when he picked Colorado. We talked about him a ton when we broke down his game. But I think he is somebody who is probably just under that very top tier. And then I think Terrell Timmons Jr. is another one that you look at, another kid that could be really good for the Buffs this year in that depth role. I don't know that he gets in and mixes it up with the top line, but if anybody goes down, anybody gets hurt, I think that Terrell Timmons Jr. could be that next one up. Tight end, we've talked about how important this position is. A lot of transfers here. Shimon Mateer, I think that he is likely your starter. I think that Sam Hart comes in and could compete for it, may compete for it, probably your tight end 2. You got Luis Pissarro all the way down there at tight end 3. I think that Mateer is probably your starter. He's got really elite pass catching ability. He was really good for Cincinnati last year. I think that he probably takes that job. Big kid. You like his frame. You like his size. You like what he may be able to bring you there at the tight end position. I think Sam Hart will get in and get some burn as well. I think they have to be better at the tight end position. Tight ends are a matchup nightmare. They're a safety release valve for a quarterback, and it'd be really big if Shedeur would have him, or really anybody, to be able to go to with a little bit more consistency. This is the big one that we've been talking about all offseason, the offensive line. I went ahead and just projected my starters. Now, what I'll tell you about this position group and every position group is that none of this is set in stone. I do believe that Shedeur Sanders is set in stone. But outside of that, a lot of these are jobs that are up for grabs. And I think a lot of different folks, a lot of different guys could end up fighting and battling for positions. So if I've left off your favorite guy, or if I've not talked about your favorite guy, just know that it wasn't intentional. This is just how I would project the season, the starting lineup on week 1 to go. Now, the good news, if I've missed your guy or haven't included your guy, is there's a long way to go. And I am wrong more often than I'm right. And so you may be in good luck. But I think on the left tackle, a kid like Jordan Seaton is too dynamic not to play there. Best tackle in the country in the recruiting class. You have to start him there. It's not the first time that you'll see a true freshman start at left tackle. I mean, Alabama did it last year. LSU did it a couple of years ago. Big-time programs do this if the player is talented enough, and Seaton certainly is. On the other side of the ball, Savion Washington is my right tackle. I believe that the familiarity and him being in the system is going to allow him to win that job, but it is a battle for that right tackle spot. Don't be surprised if he is a depth piece, but I like Savion to end up winning it. Obviously, Colorado's best lineman last year. At the guard positions, Mayers and Johnson, a couple of transfers, I believe both from UTEP. Don't quote me on that specifically, but a couple of transfers winning out the guard position there. And then I like Yakari Walker to win out the center job. Now, I'll tell you, I think 4 of these 5 positions will be battles. I think Seaton will have to battle, but I think he'll end up getting that nod at left tackle. I think 4 or 5 of these are going to be true battles. And so I could go 1 for 5 here. I guess it's possible that I could go 0 for 5. I just don't see a situation where they don't start Seton. But these may not be the 5 starters. I'll probably end up going like 3 or 4 for 5. There's a chance that a couple of these guys just are number 6 and 7 on the offensive line. You get a couple other starters in, and then maybe, Yakari and Washington are your next 2 men up. I like Yakari's familiarity with the center position. I think him coming over, him as a transfer, I really like him to end up taking that job, but that one is open. All right, and then we haven't forgotten about the position group that gets no love. The kicker. We'll count kickers as offense. Listen, I got excited when I got to type Mata's name. I got excited again when I saw that he was when I saw the picture there that we were going to use of the game winner that he had. I still think he's going to do all your extra points. I think he's probably going to do your shorter field goals. Feely, probably your kickoffs again like he did last year, and your long field goal attempts that you need. But hopefully we're in the offense, or the offense gets in the end zone way more than we are settling for long field goals. I like Mata to end up being your kicker more often than not on field goals. Now, what's all this mean? Well, this is our depth chart preview. This is our prediction. This is what we think the offense will look like. Guess what? We're only a week into spring, and we had a week off break too. There is a lot that could change. There's a lot that could be different here. There's a lot that may not look like you thought it was going to look once we get to the end of spring, once we get to the beginning of August, once we get into week 1. We're going to probably do this several times. We're going to do it again at the end of spring. We're going to do it at the beginning of August once fall camp starts. And then we will do it probably the week of the game, first game of the year. We will probably do it then too, to be able to say, like, hey, where are we exactly and what do we think will happen based on who we're talking to, based on what we read online, based on what Coach Prime says, based on what we see in videos from Well Off Media. We will certainly try and update that and keep it updated so you have a good idea. This is a very early projection. Don't take this as gold. Coach Prime didn't tell me that this is what was going down. It's a very early projection, how I see it working out. Now, what I want to do is I will grade myself later in the year. Once we get to the end of spring, I'll see how I feel at the end of spring and see if we're still 11 for 11 or whatever the numbers that work out to be. Once we get to fall camp, we'll grade it again. Once we get to the first game week, we'll grade it again, and we'll see what it looks like. The big takeaway here, though, is that this offense is going to be much improved, and it needs to be. Colorado would have won a couple more games if their offense could have gotten in gear a little bit earlier. And I don't mean earlier in the season. I mean earlier in games. Later in the year, it was tougher. The offensive line struggled. But with a rebuilt offensive line, the best quarterback in the country, according to NFL draft scouts, and the most dynamic player in the country with Travis Hunter and some really, really nice weapons on the wide receivers and the running backs, I think this offense has a chance to be very, very good. I think it can be in the 30-plus points a game range. I think they could easily be at about 32, 33 points a game, which is probably where you need to get to if you want to win 8, 9, 10 games. If they can bump that up even more, if they can be in that 35, 36 points a game range, they're going to win a lot more than they lose. Now, defense is important too, and we're going to talk about the defense very soon. We're going to do a video similar to this on defense, so if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Here's the scary part. What did I miss? Who did I leave out? Who did I I've done this before and just completely left a guy out. Thankfully, I didn't do that. I don't think this time. But who did I miss? Who did I not put in? It's your favorite player. Go ahead and chew me out in the comments. I'm good with it. Who are you excited about seeing this year? If you don't want to complain or give any comments. But listen, I welcome all thoughts, positive, negative. I like to keep things positive, but if you got any critiques or criticisms, just let me know. We'll talk about it down below. I appreciate you guys for tuning in to the prime time for college football.